Okay, so Greg, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the product street. I'm so glad that instead of coding you again, I get to go straight to the source.
Excited to be here. Think it's amazing. Keep doing what you're doing, and I hope I live up to your amazing expectations. I'll do my best.
Oh no, the pressure's all mine. But before we get the conversation rolling, Greg, why don't you introduce yourself the way you'd want to be introduced?
All right. I'm going to give a little, probably too much, and there's a reason for this. One, I like to brag because I've had a really interesting career path. The other part is I think it's important as we go into this world of sort of reinvention, so that I'm not just another talking head. I'm actually a talking head who's kind of been there. So my name's Greg Genrich. Once upon a time, I studied illustration at the Rhode Island School of Design. So if you're thinking that's a guy in a room with a bunch of other people drawing still lives with pencils and paper and all the traditional art, that's correct, right? I studied that way once upon a time. And when I graduated, I found myself at the time where society was actually trying to figure out computers. I know that sounds for many of you like, and I actually studied in the time of the dinosaurs, and maybe that's true, but we all find ourselves in these times of change. So I left school and I worked weirdly in the music industry for the first time, working with the Grateful Dead. And it was the print industry. So I was there at a time where the print industry, specifically silk screening, was trying to figure out how to use computers. Okay, so I had to, as a 22-year-old, start teaching a company how to use computers in a traditional media. I then left that job and started working for the military, doing presentations for them. I'll just say that my peer group on the military side and my peer group on the Grateful Dead side didn't come to the same parties because they were very different people. But again, the military was in a place where they were just trying to figure out how to do interactive CD-ROMs. So I had to figure that out. I then went into television. Same story. I was working for show opens for Wheel of Fortune and HBO, and I got a chance to win a couple of design awards for international show opens and stuff, which is great. But the only reason I got to do that is because I had to introduce them to what a Mac was and how Avid systems could work better than the traditional systems. I then got hired away from that to start in the early days of e-commerce. And it was a very interesting time because I got to do things like work with clients and do research, because at that particular time there was no e-commerce. So I had to spend a lot of time saying, and if you put your credit card into this, it will be okay. And something will show up at your door. And at that particular time, which was interesting, the e-commerce darling, the first company that was really doing this was 1-800-Flowers, delivering flowers, which is not what you would think is a high-tech company, but that's the point. They were early adopters, but they weren't a technology company. They were using the technology to actually do something brilliant. So I was involved in early downloadable music. I was involved in working with a lot of stars like U2 and Paul McCartney and David Bowie and the Leonard Bernstein family, and trying to figure out what their presence online was going to be like. I then started working in the wonderful smartphone boom before and after the iPhone. So I got to go around in New York City with a lot of startups and talk to agencies and whatnot and explain to them what mobile advertising could be. And yeah, I looked around a lot at myself and said, why am I the dude who's going to be doing this stuff? And the answer kind of is I am fascinated by new technologies. I think it's a very interesting time. Now, if you were to go way back and ask my mom, what is something that Greg is not good at? She would say change. I don't like change. When she threw a birthday party, like a surprise birthday party for me, I hated it. The thing is, I'm really good at it. So I find myself at this time in history again, where we're all trying to figure out what to do in a B2C world. I find myself at a time with all of us, with AI. What are we going to do in an AI world? And whether I liked it or not, I got to go through all of these different companies and all of these different experiences and industries. We have to use the fact that I've had to walk through these times of change. I always say, if I ever write a book, it's going to be called In an Attempt to Look Elegant While Falling Downstairs. And I would like to help you look elegant as we all fall down these stairs together.
Wow, Greg, that was such a ride in the best way.
Yeah, I don't know. At the time, I don't think I could have appreciated that. I wish I had a time machine right now to go back and play that back to myself and what you just said, because it was not a lot of fun at the time.
No, I feel like you've lived 5 different lives already, and somehow all of them come together to shape the way you lead today. I love how you talked about pivoting, not just as survival, but as a way to recenter on what actually matters. That really landed for me.
I think that's interesting because one of the things is, if you're not in the startup world, right, and that's a double-edged sword. I loved it. I got addicted to it in a lot of ways because of the energy and the excitement of it. But it's also hard and challenging. I see it as like, from a startup point of view, I'm like, oh my God, there's so many amazing new things. My wife looks at it and says, oh great, your career's a lot more stable. So we both win. But one of the things you mentioned is pivot. So in the startup world, people will say things like, fail fast, right? Everyone's heard that. That is not what they mean, okay? That is not the intended purpose of that quote. So erase that from your head, okay, everybody. What it means is that you're going to have to pivot, okay? What it means is get stuff out early, so it's time to market. Listen to your clients and your investors and your stockholders, and pivot as soon as you realize you're not going on the right way. What fail fast means is learn and pivot fast, right? So I have a quote for you on this one, right? So actually a study. So a Harvard study says 75% of venture-backed startups pivot, okay? The definition of success of a startup are the people who don't do it right and pivot faster. And now that's not just for startups, right? Like we're about to go into the AI world, or we already are in the AI world. When we screw up, fess up to it and pivot faster. That isn't about failure. That's about, like no one's going to drive down a road and see a wall in front of you and be like, nope, I'm just going to go through that wall. No, turn, bring in other people, bring in new perspectives, and bring in research as soon as humanly possible, because that will tell you if you should be pivoting sooner. Nothing about failure. Failure is not recognizing that you need to pivot.
That just made so much sense. Thank you for putting it that way. Especially in today's world where we have so many AI products around us and more companies popping up every day, not to mention how companies that have already been around for a while now are also focused on bringing in AI into their product systems. And that's what they ask themselves. How can I bring AI into my products? When the real question I think they should be asking is, what problem can AI solve with my product offerings? And
Correct.
I'd even go so far as to say this question factors what makes that product successful in the market. And Greg, you have been doing this for over 2 decades now. So what's your take on what separates good versus great products?
Okay, so we'll talk about Steve Jobs probably. It'll come up a couple times. It's not that I'm enamored by Steve Jobs, but he just said a lot of really smart things. He was also a friend of a friend kind of thing, so I'll quote him too much. I really like his design is not just what it looks and feels like. Design is how it works, right? Versus bad product. If you think about almost any product you look at, I don't care about 99% of what's there, because they've tried to cram everything in. Look at our product, it's so amazing. Let's put all this stuff in there. That's noise. Right? Google does many things wrong, but one of the things it gets right is when you go to google.com, there is exactly one thing to do. Well, how we move from good to great is when we empower you as our customer to be a better you. It's AI or not AI, if it's a good idea, use this time, because the cement will harden and it'll be harder to invoke change in the future. But at this time, we have the luxury of using AI, or at least different thinking, to do something different. Every morning, you can all make fun of me going forward, ready? Enough people already do. I turn on ChatGPT, and I have a roving discussion argument with it. And here's the asterisk part. Do not please include any sort of information about ADP. Don't, be responsible about all this stuff. We have to do this above everything. But was I not 30 minutes ago having a discussion about maybe giving me some tips and tricks about how to talk at a podcast so you don't embarrass myself? Absolutely. Was I giving it some questions like this one to say, hey, can you critique this? Absolutely. Why wouldn't you do that? Okay, so if I can do that on a regular basis, and if you're in a car next to me, I apologize because I'm the raving lunatic next to you at the stoplight. When you're talking about human, AI can replace certain humans, but it shouldn't. We all have, half of our days, if not 75% of our days, are looking at emails and all these goofy little things that really are not using our brains. Now, if we could all of a sudden use artificial intelligence to maybe get rid of all of that noise, right? My entire career has been about converting a concept to a visualization so that you care about it. How often do I get to use that part of my own skill set? 10%? 5%? With AI, theoretically, if it gets rid of all of the other stuff, I can use my full powers, right? You could sit there and say, again, AI is a conversational UX. You could have done that a long time ago. No one should be taking a really long and arduous process and turning it into a really long and boring conversation. All right, that doesn't help anybody. Now, if you look at it and say, oh, well, it's a more relatable shortcut. Again, don't believe all of the little bumper stickers, right? Fail fast. No. Be knowledgeable and pivot. Conversational UX. No. Relatable shortcut. Okay? There's some truth in what they're saying, but don't think it's a strategy. You have to think about this stuff. And I think to be more human, we need to use this technology to empower us as humans so that we can empower our clients as humans to be more effective. That's the definition, my definition of building a great product.
That resonated so much, especially the part about great products help people feel successful, not just get things done. And it really shifts the focus away from taking off a feature list and toward understanding real human outcomes. But speaking of features, I was recently talking to my product counterpart. We ended up chatting about how, depending on the product maturity of the organization, your product is either an empowered product team or it's a feature team. Like feature teams are focused on the output, versus product teams are focused on the outcome, are measured by outcome, are actually empowered to come up with solutions that work. So I'm curious, is there a UX equivalent to this idea? Are there like UX teams or UXers who end up functioning more like delivery arms rather than as strategic partners?
Yes, and some of that's okay. It shouldn't be the majority. I mean, there are certain things where we just have to get stuff out the door. And that's okay, right? I think that especially in UX, we're advocates for our clients and advocates for our client success. Same thing with product. And actually, I would argue it's the same thing with dev, right? So that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? That's the human side again. But sometimes we just need to get things out the door. It's just like, is the launch, is the launch screen working? Is that list page appropriate? Is it too long? Is it working on mobile? A lot of our dailiness is going to be associated with that, but not all of it, right? So some features just need to get out the door. That is someplace I think that we should be looking at, maybe AI being able to help more out, because we need to unlock our brains into really focusing on something else. Now, the product maturity side is an interesting question. And here's your counterintuitive answer. Since I told you about my daily arguments with ChatGPT on the way to work. So I asked it the other day. I call it Jeepers. It calls me Greg. I wonder why. Anyways, so I said, Jeepers, maybe it will be answering. I said, I have this theory. I believe that a healthy, engaged, and I will dare say fun team makes better products. And ones that are not balanced and have a strong culture probably make inferior products. Do you agree? And it said yes. Okay, well, of course it's going to say yes. It's sucking up to its owner, right? Or owner, partner. Anyways, I said, okay, great. Go look at the internet and what are companies, just based on the product and the experience, which ones are struggling? And it came back with, not a shocker, X. We all know its struggles and so forth with Elon Musk and whatnot. But I asked from just a visual point of view, just from a UX consistency point of view, how is its culture health? And it said it was awful. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. That's kind of an easy one. I would have guessed that too. Now, from a healthy point of view, just look at the visuals. Just look at the product. What are some companies that you would guess that you'd want to work at because its culture is so strong that it's coming through in its product? And it picked out two. One is Notion, and I have looked at it since, and I was like, wow, yeah, that's cool. You could tell, those people love their product. And the other one was Figma, and I've had some interactions with the Figma team, and total home runs in both cases. Like, you don't talk to someone who works at Figma who isn't passionate about Figma. And I was like, okay, well, those are your theories. Now, go on Glassdoor or whatever and tell me what their actual people who are working at these places think about their culture. And it aligned. So when you look at the maturity and reinvention of a product, you absolutely have to look at the culture. And that's going to wind up taking more time than the actual reinvention of the product because you're talking about people. Again, let's go back to the human side. If you're going to empower the humans, empower the humans. And some people aren't going to make it, and that's a little brutal. And some people are going to be the most amazing people because they've been unleashed in a new way, and that's astonishing.
I love how you put that. Then, this is a question I ask all my guests, and I always love the range of answers that come out of it. So, what's an unpopular opinion you have about leadership?
Oh, good. That's kind of you to put me on the spot. For any leaders that are listening, you're a genius. Okay, now between the rest of us, I am very fortunate to have a really good leader or manager myself. I'll call him my boss just because he hates that term, and that's one of my litmus tests. If you'd like to be called the boss, talk to your therapist. A manager's job is just to take the heat. To run air cover for teams that will experiment and try new things and try to push the limits within reason and responsibly so that they can do their job and push the product to the next level. It is also our job to make sure that the culture is strong to embrace all these kind of things and that everyone's in a safe and structured place so that they can succeed. That has nothing to do with ego. That has a lot to do with responsibility. If we all put ourselves in that position, that means that a lot of times you don't know the answer. If you are a leader, embrace this immediately because it does a couple of things. I don't know. It's my responsibility. But we will figure it out because we're a team. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a challenging thing. But that's an inclusive answer, and I love that. And I don't hear that from enough people. I mean, I'm not going to point fingers on very specific things, but if we had a president that said something like that, I think that'd be kind of amazing. He's supposed to know everything, but if you think that's the case, it's ridiculous. Nobody can do that, but we can figure it out. Another thing I'm a huge fan of, and this because I told you earlier I had this crazy path to get here. In most of the startups I've worked at, I was either the entire design team or most of the design team, or in charge of a design team, or whatever. But that's a lot of responsibility, okay? I think that in a startup, in essence, everyone's a mini CEO. It's just kind of how it works. And so that's how I roll. I give people a lot of responsibility. I think you cannot micromanage. If you try to micromanage, one, that doesn't scale, and two, it's insulting. Nobody wants someone over your shoulder telling you a little to the left, a little bit up, a little down, a little more purple. Like, stop. All right? If you're doing that because you don't have faith in your team, then you hired poorly. Hire brilliantly, empower those people, and do not micromanage them. It's ridiculous. It slows us down. It's not good business, and it's insulting. It also is a giant blow to culture. And if you're doing that, reach out. I'll help you figure it out because that's how I've always run. And maybe that's not the corporate style, so maybe that's challenging. I don't care. It's the right answer. Another one I would say is, and this goes into the micromanagement thing, is what if I were to say, whoever you are, you have a team of 5 people, and you really need a team of 10 people, right? You're just understaffed, whatever. We all have to deal with budgets and stuff. What if I said, well, I can give you, 10 people working hours, but I'm not going to give you any more real people. You'd be like, that's impossible. That's crazy. No, what I'm saying is kill your meetings. Cut all your meetings by half or get rid of them. It's a classic. Should this be a meeting or should that be an email? I would also suggest that meetings are there to empower teams to make things. You want to double your effectiveness, empower people, and get their meetings out of the way. And if your meetings aren't organized to empower your people to produce or give insight to them to be better at what they do, kill them immediately, because it's ridiculous. We're a meeting culture that is fantastic for maintenance, perhaps. That's maybe maintenance of managers. Look, I'm really important. I have all these meetings. Look at my calendar. It's ridiculous. I encourage you all. Look at my calendar. It's ridiculous. I would like to think that I'm encouraging people all the way, but we are in a meeting culture where we should be in a product creation culture. And I'm sure there's lots of managers who would disagree with that, because it is all about culture. And we don't question our people. We guide them. We mentor them. There's plenty of that. And we're at a time where we may actually need to educate them to another level. Because you can't just say, oh, look, now do your job with AI. Oh, look, now do your job with computers. Oh, look, now, the sundial is no longer effective. We're all going to have wristwatches. It's times of change, and managers, do your homework, man. Empower your people. I'm trying to do that. Have arguments with Jeepers. I do that on a regular basis. See the good, the bad, the ugly. Avoid the ugly. And then kill the meetings, and then let's go invent the future together, shall we?
Okay, wow, not one, but 3 spicy takes. Clearly, you've been sitting on these for a while.
Yeah, maybe I should shut up more, but I got opinions.
Oh no, I'm glad you do, because I love how each of them challenges a default setting in leadership that we often just accept without questioning.
I think your job, everyone who's not in leadership, I would suggest I'm in some leadership, but not all. Part of our job is questioning leadership, respectfully, with suggestions.
Makes sense. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I may have borrowed a quote of yours in my previous episode without asking for permission.
You have permission.
GPT, both the best and the worst thing to happen to AI. And I was like, yep, that's going in. So now you're actually here. Care to unpack that a little more for us?
Sure. I love ChatGPT. I think it's amazing. I'll use it as an example, right? So I worked in mobile before the iPhone, super crazy early days. Just to put it in perspective, I had 4 colors to work with. These were Palm Pilots. I had green, darker green, and black. And I had to then go to Absolute and BMW and stuff and say, hey, this is how we're going to do your mobile ads. And they were like, oh, that's great. Green, hate green. And I was like, but you'll be in everyone's pocket. So anyways, it sets certain expectations and it does a lot of weird stuff. But people get really enamored by technology, and it limits their thinking. Don't let that last part happen. ChatGPT is fantastic in that it's all of a sudden said, hey, expect more from your computer and your digital devices, because it can know you. It can limit some of the options. It can empower you. All that's great. Love it. As I said, it's changed the way I drive to work. But here's the other part. Everyone started looking at it as that is the UX for AI. I'm going to ask it a question. It's going to give me an answer. And there's this thing that's it's interesting. It's annoying. I was actually having a discussion with Jeepers today. It's called sycophancy, and they found out that the AI models that people like the most are the ones that say, "Oh, you're the smartest thing of all times." That's a great answer, Greg. Keep doing what you're doing. It's like those stupid posters that say teamwork, but as a conversationalist, it's super annoying. So I was trying to say, ChatGPT, please stop kissing my butt on our way to work. I need it to challenge me as anything. So anyways, but the thing about it is, one, it is a sycophant to you. It's a conversation. Let's be honest. We're not all brilliant for every stupid question we ask it. And should we be even asking the questions to begin with? The thing that drives me crazy about ChatGPT is and I'll be controversial here, it's like when we're looking at things like ADP Assist, should we just be putting a chat UX? I don't think so. In certain cases, that makes a lot of sense. If we're looking at the chat experience and saying, oh, okay, well, someone wants to actually kind of go through that. That's part of it. But it's not the big win. The big win is it should be anticipating stuff. It should be predicting potential pain points, right? Say you do a search. I want to do something for year end for payroll. So I say, year end payroll. And one, it's native language, right? That's AI. It opens it up and it says, I know that Greg usually has a problem doing his taxes or setting things up for his taxes year end. So I'm going to put a button right there that says, would you like me to run you through this? And then I click it and maybe the chat comes up. Or better yet, something pops up that says, hey, you usually kind of screw this up. You want me to just do it for you. No conversation, push a button, done. That's way more interesting. But if you're used to a chat GPT and it's going to be this back and forth, no. Anticipate my needs, predict my needs, come up with solutions. Of course, there can be a chat around it, but that is actually the last UX experience I want. Know me, meet me where I'm at, solve my problem, do it in the background after establishing trust with me, and let's not have that conversation, please.
Yeah, that really helped. I've definitely seen both sides of that coin where one day, it feels like a creative co-pilot and the next day is like a shortcut to sounding like everyone else. It's helpful, but also suspiciously good at making mediocrity look polished, which is also what my boss says about me. But
I would agree with you, right? Like you can look, yeah, artistically mediocre, fantastic. Go do that somewhere else.
yeah. Okay, jokes aside, let's talk real advice. Let me throw one of my favorite questions at you. What is one piece of advice you have for product leaders today?
Okay, I've already touched on all of this stuff. Build the kind of team you don't need to lead. Number one, right? Just that is self-explanatory, I think. And design a culture where design research, the triad thrive together. If you're sitting there saying, oh, I never get invited to this meeting, are you also inviting them to your meetings? I'm just saying, this is a two-way road, right? Like you can't be demanding of, I'm not being included, but then you don't include them. You need to shift from control to clarity, right? If people are doing the wrong thing, it's probably most likely because I didn't communicate that effectively. You get all frustrated. Oh my God, they're all doing these crazy things. Why are they doing this stuff? When the problem is you. I don't want to hear that either, but that is probably reality. Okay? And then I think the last one to your initial question is, from a management point of view, is that you are not the main character. But our job is to be a multiplier, not the main character.
Okay, full disclaimer, I don't have direct reports or a leadership title, but I do have a not so secret obsession with decoding what good leadership actually looks like. And that bit you just said about putting in the reps before trying to influence the game, I felt that. So,
Well, guess what? I'm going to tell you. Here's my crystal ball. Ready? You'll be a manager at one point um, because you're studying that, and because now leaders pay attention. Um, you are a storyteller. That's important. You are explaining. You're trying to find the strategy behind these things, and you don't become a manager, or you shouldn't become a manager or a leader without a strategy. And the fact that you're studying these things, I'll guarantee you will be a manager at one point. And that is both a vote of confidence and a curse. So be careful what you wish for.
that's well said. Okay, I've been holding on to this ever since you mentioned it earlier. I mean, you casually dropped that one of your career goals was to present in front of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And I've got to ask, what about his leadership style made that such a meaningful aspiration for you?
I never got the opportunity to meet Steve Jobs. I think that might be a good thing because he is a notorious, pardon the phrase, asshole, but a brilliant one. So the DRB, the design review board that we did, a guy named Carrie Fier and myself were like, how do you make great products? When we were talking about reinventing run, and we need to work on process. So the entire DRB process is based on Steve Jobs, because we were like, what company do we want to aspire to be at a specific time in history? That process was, we don't have a Steve Jobs, but can we make a process that's like a Steve Jobs? So you have to go in, you have to present as a demo, always a demo, period. Because the only way you look at a product the way a client does is if it moves and behaves and all that kind of stuff, right? So Stevie has tracked me my entire career. But let's go back. So I used to work in the music industry a lot. A lot of the people I worked with then went to Cupertino to start up iTunes and then Apple Music. I've got to present in front of some very important people. I was doing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's first website and had to present in front of their board, which was led by the CEO of Pepsi. I've had to present in front of a lot of very impactful, strong, difficult people. And the absolute most difficult and challenging person would have been Steve Jobs. So when I was a consultant, Apple was a client of mine for probably about a decade. I got the opportunity to work early days on what an iPad could be. So I did all these mock-ups with my kids, like holding these things that were supposed to be iPads, and I got to challenge some of their UX and some of their products, and I got to work with Apple University in the early days. I got to work with Apple Music. Apple Music used to go on tour with different artists, try to figure out how Apple Music could use, like, say, modular architecture to have a presence at these crazy concerts all over the world, and it was very fun. It was very cool. But the thing that I learned that was really interesting was Apple is just like anybody else. Like they have brilliant people, but they bring in other people to look differently at their own product. Like, why were they bringing me in to be like, hey, this is how you can be even cooler? Like, really? Anyways, but it was a lot of fun. But and I know that Steve Jobs saw some of my work, but I wanted to present to him in person because I wanted the trial by fire. I wanted you're pointless, get the hell out of here. Or in my wildest dream, just a little eyebrow of that's cool. Like, I would have traded a lot for that eyebrow moment. Just that. So, good buddy of mine was head of Apple Music for, global marketing, and the most recent time I went out to Cupertino, we were hanging out, and we went to the Steve Jobs internal memorial thing and all this kind of stuff, and I was pitching this idea where Apple University, for those of you who don't know, is when Steve Jobs realized he was dying, he started a thing that's basically was just like, I want the way I challenge people, the way I manage people to stay alive. So he started this thing called Apple University, and he handpicked the person to be in charge of it, a guy named Joel. And so I was like, well, that's great, and I didn't know all this. I was just like, oh, Apple University is really great. This is a way to introduce yourself to different Apple products. And I really like the way they're thinking. I like the way that they approach different things, because if you think about it, like when you're holding one of these things, yours is different than mine. Everything we just talked about, right? Like, they look the same, but yours is extremely different than what mine is. It's an extension of who I am. I view it that way. It's not a technology. It's actually, again, making me a better me. Like, they're doing all this stuff way before everybody else. I think that they're doing that brilliantly. So I get introduced. I go to Cupertino, and I'm hanging out, and I'm kind of bummed because everyone's kind of bummed because Steve Jobs passed away. And so I met Joel. And I was like, hey, Joel, guy named Joel Podolny. And we had a great conversation. And I was like, oh, maybe you should take Apple University on the road as well, just like Apple Music. And I was like, picture a world. This is the pitch, ready? And I had lots of visuals. I was like, say it's Central Park. And one day, a bunch of artists, you make a little village, right? A couple little huts or whatever. And you have a photographer, and you have an artist, and a painter, and you have a poet, and they're using Apple products. And people can come and check out how they're using Apple products to be the best poet or the best painter. And people, wow, that's really great. And you go the next day, right? And all of a sudden the village got a little bit bigger, right? So now all of a sudden maybe there's a dozen little things. And you can learn how people are doing it in teachers, right? Teachers are how I can use these products. And you go back the next day and it's even a little bit bigger. And this time only students can come. And they learn how to use technology to make them better. And you keep growing until there's like this village and it's showing all this kind of stuff. And again, it's Apple University, and of course it's to sell products and show Apple stuff and all this kind of stuff. But it's actually showing how technology, when properly included into people's lives, can improve who they are, right? So I'm like, hey, Joel, here you go, buddy. This is going to be awesome. And he was like, this is really great, but this isn't what we're focusing on right now. So maybe that will come someday, and I would love to be able to say maybe I helped encourage that too. But the thing that I thought was amazing was, so we had all these conversations and stuff, and I had to go back to the airport. And Joel stopped by, and he was like, hey, Greg, you want to ride to the airport? And I was like, all right, important dude asking me to go to the airport. This is cool. So I had him alone for a good amount of time, and we wandered around, and I was just like, what was that like? He got handpicked by Steve Jobs to continue his management legacy, intellectual curiosity. He was like, oh my God, it was insane. He's like, I was just brought in to like be part of Apple University. And then all of a sudden, he found out that he was going to die. And all of a sudden my interview went from being like, how are you going to keep me alive? And so we had this really long conversation about when you finally find a way to not be comfortable in the time in which you are. You're always going to be inquisitive. You're going to be trying to find the right way that took you from riding a horse to riding in a car, being before airplanes to being in an airplane, before computers to being in a computer. How do you manage these times of change? By being relentlessly curious and being comfortable with being wrong and having a culture of experimentation. And then having the challenge of leadership. And when someone finally figures that out, the Henry Fords of the world, the Wright brothers of the world, the Steve Jobs of the world, how do you keep that going? Well, also to be self-realization. And he was an egomaniac. And, I got plenty of stories if you want to hear them about very specific examples where he was just the worst human being alive. But to realize that he did have a certain amount of genius and he wanted to keep that going, not just for Apple's sake, but for everyone who walks around with an Apple product's sake. And then that's your job description. So way to go, Joel. You're rocking it. But man, that is a beast of an interview with someone who's dying, and a beast of a responsibility. So that kind of went a little bit further, but I would have loved, I've gotten beaten up by many people. I would have loved to gotten beaten up by Steve Jobs. Or again, in the very off chances I'm having a good day, that little eyebrow tweak of, well, I hadn't thought of that, because that would have made my life or career anyways.
It's interesting how a simple gesture like an eyebrow raise or a compliment that can carry so much weight. In a way, it speaks to the power of leadership and influence, how the smallest signs of recognition from someone we admire can have an incredible impact on us.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's everything, right? This is what we're talking about when you say easy, smart, and human. It's like ChatGPT is never going to do an eyebrow raise. Well, maybe not right now. Anyways, but that's where you realize that you've connected or challenged or provided insight to somebody that has inspired so many people. If you can contribute to that, I mean, come on, that's the name of the game.
I like it. Yeah, okay. Deep breaths, because we've reached the part of the show where the tables turn.
Oh boy, this is what I live for.
We call it the reverse hot, where you get to put me on the spot with one question of your choice. You can go specific, you can go random, but I hope you can go easy. Your call.
Okay. All right. So you're a podcaster by passion, correct? Joe Kleinwalker has been talking about with UX that we need to become better storytellers, right? And if you think about a lot of things we've talked about today, and actually the entire purpose of this is that stories connect deeply, right? They unlock empathy. And I use an example, right? So in research, you can wind up with a lot of data points. And that's important, right? Are things connecting? Are things resonating with people? Is your product success or whatever? But storytelling is what brings the empathy part. If you say something like, 3 out of 4 children are going to bed hungry, that's an awful statistic. But if you describe and tell a story of a child that's going to bed hungry, that connects you on a whole different level, right? This is the human side that Srini talks about. Like, we want to care. We want to make a difference. As a podcaster, what have you found to be the benefits of storytelling? And also, not just from yourself, but from the leaders you talk about.
Oh, I love that question. I think storytelling has been like our oldest operating system because even as kids, we didn't learn about the world through, say, bullet points. We learned through bedtime stories, fables, and make believe. So before we even knew how to read spreadsheets or strategy decks, we were sitting cross legged listening to someone tell us a story about how a tortoise raised a rabbit. And that's how we learned through stories. I think that's also how we start understanding consequences or emotions or decisions. And I feel like that wiring doesn't just go away because we grow up. And even today, the best product teams know that we're not selling software, we're selling the story behind why it matters. So I've also been hearing more about the shift from SaaS to what some people are starting to call RAS, results as service. And
Love it.
honestly, it makes a lot of sense because people don't just want access to tools anymore. They want outcomes. They're not paying for software, they're paying for results, for success.
That's right.
And if that's really where we're headed, and I think we are, then the way we talk about our products becomes even more important. We're not just selling a platform, you're kind of selling a promise. And that promise has to be wrapped in a story that people believe in. Because if we're expecting someone to bet on an outcome, we better tell them a story that makes them feel like they are already halfway there. So same goes for leadership, right? When you talk about a tough call, a big miss, or like a funny early career fail, which you covered during this podcast, it connects, it sticks. Sure, ChatGPT can do a good job at storytelling too. I mean, as a wise guy once said, it's both the best and the worst thing to happen to AI. But what AI doesn't have, I think, is uh, the messy context, the
Correct.
I feel this in my bones kind of energy that our stories bring. Um, it can tell a story, but I don't think it has lived one because that kind of stuff you can't fake. So, yeah, maybe we may outgrow bedtime, but we never outgrow a good story.
I would hope we never outgrow bedtime stories in general. And I think you're right. I think it goes even deeper, right? Like, we did all sit around listening to stories, but the initial way humans actually spread information, we're talking about going around the campfire like when we were all Neanderthals or whatever. That's actually coded so deeply in our DNA that we will never get rid of it. And it will probably take a chat GPT that long to catch up. So
Yeah.
if this is going to be the definition of human, I think you're right. I think storytelling is part of the definition, the core definition of storytelling and what we innately want. Then we need to embrace this. And here's a hot take, right? Like, we want to embrace this. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is the definition of human. So I think it actually, when we talk about UX and things, I don't actually like that whole term like, oh, well, we're going to make it delightful because it seems shallow. But when it comes to storytelling, delightful is what we want. The experience, the interaction, and when people sit there and talk about, and thank you for the wise guy crack, but the Chat GPT thing is interesting because it can tell stories, but it will never understand stories. That's what we do.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Wow, I love how you put that. So, next question. This one is about, there are times of change. We are in a time of change. So, speaking to a lot of leaders, I think one question that I'm going to start asking, starting with you, is how do you think leadership styles change with these change in times? And that leads to a question about what is your current leadership style like?
So in times of change, well, in times in general, right? There are the maintainers of the world and there are the inventors of the world. When you're between large paradigm shifts, maintenance is fine, right? Because what you want to do is maintain health. You want to incrementally advance things. You want to meet people where they are. But in times of change, it's different. You still need to maintain a certain level of quality, but the definition of quality changes, right? You need to maintain a certain level of security and responsibility, but there may be new tools to deliver that. We have to get out of our comfort zone and realize that for a specific time in history, and this is very alarming for some people, and I love it, is that nobody knows. Nobody knows what's coming. Nobody knows what the new standard is. Nobody knows what the right solution is. And it's a massive leveler. But at this time, we're all struggling together, which is the definition of team, by the way, right? Forget hierarchies. We're now all struggling together to realize the potential to take this trustworthiness of AD work to the next level, and the usability to the next level, the approachability to the next level, because we're all redefining what the product of the future is. So number one, I would suggest, and this is part of my style, when you are creating something, there are no titles, period. I don't care. There's no place for politics. There's no place for deference because somebody has a longer history than you. All that history is very important, but it's less important in a time of change. The smartest person probably might be the youngest person in the room because they were born in a digital world. They were born in a mobile world. They were born in an AI world. So listen up. That's my job. That's Srini's job. That's Maria's job. And they do that. I've seen them do that. But it changes the playing field. And I think for people who are more creative, we need to find our voice. And that comes with responsibility, right? Like you need to realize it can't just be a smart idea or a good idea. It needs to be a strategic idea. And you have to understand, and this is the hard part with designers sometimes, and I put myself in this as well, is sometimes when you say something like, I've made this site more delightful. There's that word again, right? Well, a business person isn't going to care about that so much. Delight, whatever. If you say this will aid with retention, I just said the same thing. Okay, I made something that's sticky. It will stay there. You have to understand how you're communicating storytelling to an audience, right? So that the thing that you know advances the cause. And it's a bigger responsibility for everybody. And it's harder, right? Like if I'm the CEO or CPO or whatever, I might not like being challenged by the person they hired yesterday. I'm just saying, I'm going to guess that if you listen more on that front, you probably get some newer and fresher ideas. I find myself in the exact same place. I'm probably not the expert I once was in a maintaining world. In an invention world, the best ideas float to the top, period.
That's fair. Well, Greg, this has been such a thoughtful, funny, and ridiculously insightful conversation. And thank you for bringing your whole self to this stories, pivots, unpopular opinions, and all of that. I know folks listening in are going to walk away with a lot. So thank you so much.
I hope so. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, I admire you for what you do. You don't need to be doing this because it is important. Like I am a big fan, and all that is doing is inspiring other people to get off your ass and do something, and that's a good thing.